This video is part one of an overview of the new features and enhancements to texture painting in Autodesk Mudbox 2010, specifically the new interoperability between Mudbox and Adobe Photoshop. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is a cool new addition here to the Mudbox tools. I'm just going to jump in and actually grab my projection brush and use a skin map that I've created here for my character. I'm going to make my brush nice and big, and I just want to go ahead and line this guy up so I can get the kind of scale to the pores that I want. And I'm going to start by creating a nice base map here. So I'm just going to jump into my projection brush and actually turn on mirroring. So in Mudbox 2010 we now have the ability to go ahead and take advantage of mirroring with stencils and images here. So I can go ahead and just project on my texture that I want to work with, and you can see that I'm able to really quickly build up my base map here. So this is a huge time saver. In previous releases of Mudbox, you actually had to rotate the model around and just go ahead and paint the entire model without taking advantage of symmetry while painting. So this is a great, really fast way to actually get in kind of a nice base map overall here. Of course, one of the problems with painting with symmetry is that we're most likely going to end up with a bit of a texture seam down the middle of our character here, which is not a big deal at all in Mudbox. I can just go ahead and turn off the mirroring, and you can see we have a bit of a seam there. So I've turned off the mirroring, and I can just go ahead and quickly kind of break up that symmetry with turning the mirroring off. And I'm just going right down any kind of seam that might have been left over there from that texture painting. There, so we have a good base map to start with here. And now probably the biggest and coolest thing here right now is that I can go ahead and actually export out this layer. So I can either right click on my layer or jump into the menu here and hit export selected, and you can see in our file type format menu here I can just jump right down to Photoshop PSD, and I'm just going to set this one here as, we'll just call it base temp, and let it write out the file format. And I'll just jump into Photoshop, and I'm just going to open up that file that we've just created, and you'll see a couple things that happen here. It actually throws in our layer that we've worked with, and it throws in a nice little UV mesh as a reference here for texture painting in Photoshop, which is nice. I'm just going to actually turn that off and just work with our base map here. Just going to take advantage of some of the power of Photoshop and just quickly go in and do a nice little color correct here on our base map here. And you can see that I'm able to just, I'm just going to bring some reds and purple hue out on the skin here a bit. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit save on that actually right now. Hop back into Mudbox here, and we can actually just go right to our layer. If I right click on the layer again, you'll see refresh selected. If you look in the viewport, you'll actually see it, we kind of have this live bridge to Photoshop. We were able to update our texture layer there with our color corrected version there. Now we still have this live bridge going, so I'm just going to hop back into Photoshop and actually bring up the ambient occlusion map I used the map extraction tools in Mudbox to create, and I'm just going to go ahead and actually do a nice multiply on this guy here, so I can just kind of multiply that in. I'm just going to merge that layer down to preserve the file here, and just go ahead and once again save, jump back into Mudbox, and again refresh that layer. And you can see how quickly I'm working here back and forth between Mudbox and Photoshop, and I'm actually able to take advantage of the power of both apps here. And I have a nice base map that I've created rather quickly with ambient occlusion baked in, so now I have a good starting point to go ahead and texture this guy up. So let's actually just go ahead and create a whole new layer and jump in and take a look at some of the other cool things here in Mudbox. I'm just going to jump into my image browser. I have a bunch of skin textures in here, and I'm just going to go to this little splotches image that I have, and I'm just going to throw that in as a stencil. So in my view, I'll just keep using my projection brush here. I'm going to take advantage of my mirroring tool again. But the nice thing about what I'm doing here is I'm actually just taking an image with some transparency on it, and I'm going to go ahead and apply that detail much like you would kind of like a decal or a a transfer in a kind of a model, like a model airplane kind of kit type of approach here. So I'm able to just go ahead and just quickly get some of that splotchy effect on here. So I'm taking advantage of the nice alpha out kind of transparency on this, and then maybe just scale this out to get some kind of larger ones along his shoulders and up the back of his head here. And that's fine. Then of course, using that layer, I can go ahead and blend down the opacity of it to give a nice little bit of a kind of effect along his chest and neck there. So that's fine. So we've taken a look at how we can use the projection brush and some nice transparency maps to project here live in Mudbox. Let's take a look at a different approach here with Photoshop. There are two different techniques to work with Photoshop from Mudbox now. We've seen the UV approach where we're actually working with our UV layout right in Photoshop from our layers. We can now actually work with a screen projection approach here. So I can take advantage of any kind of view in my of my model. In this case, let's go ahead and do some editing on the top of his head here. And I can just go ahead and go in underneath the File menu and use Export Screen to PSD. You'll see this little menu come up. We have a couple presets here. Use screen size, double the screen size 4 times. You can customize and use any resolution you want at all. I'm just, for this example, going to use screen size for this. Hit Export to PSD. You'll see the PSD file format come up there. And we're just going to use something here. We'll just call this head top. And we'll just go ahead and write out a PSD format, and a couple things happen. It actually goes ahead and opens Photoshop for you and brings in the image that we've just created, and then you can see this nice little 5-layer setup that it's brought in here. So you can see the textured layer here. Everything else is locked. It clearly states here, paint here. This is the layer to work on. If I turn that off, you'll see that we just have kind of a Mudbox shading up above. If I turn that off, we get this kind of flat lit kind of overall diffuse look. If we take a look at our texture there, we get this flat lit diffuse look as well. And if I put the shading back on top, we kind of see our overall shaded result in there. So all of those layers are locked. We can do anything with them. We're not actually going to edit them. We're only going to work essentially with this layer here. But that doesn't mean I'm stuck to that layer right now. I can just go ahead and I'm going to bring in this image here. And I want to actually blend the effect of this skin with my existing skin map I'm working with in Mudbox. So I'm just going to go ahead and select a thing here. I've actually got a nice feathering effect of 25 pixels going on. And what I'm going to do is just go ahead and delete the extra area around there. And I just want to kind of take advantage of the blending effects here in Photoshop. And let's see, so we can actually play with it a couple different things. I'm going to use a linear dodge or an add on this. And maybe we'll just kind of bring this up a bit in here and kind of break this up so that we can kind of blend the skin effects together nicely. So there you can see that I'm blending the two kind of different skin effects together quite nicely. Take a look at this up close, and that's fine. I'm actually just going to go ahead and merge this down with my paint here layer, and then I'm just going to go ahead and quickly save that out and jump back into Mudbox here. And you can see that if I go ahead and move the camera, it doesn't really matter. But once I use my file re-import from PSD, and we just go back to our head top file that we were working with there, it remembers what it was working with there, and also gives you this little note that it's noticed that there has been a modification to that PSD format here. This is once again that live bridge with Photoshop. It's brought it back to where that was the screen image was grabbed from, and it's actually projected that overall effect right onto the top of his head here. So because we put it in, we've got this into a nice little layer here. We can go ahead and dial up the overall effect of that in there. So you can see the overall power of using Photoshop with Mudbox. Two very different techniques taking advantage of the power of both applications, and in the end the result is a nice seamless transfer of data between Mudbox and Adobe Photoshop.